Mr. Jared Smola of Draftsharks. We need to figure out who the busts are so everyone else doesn't have to do it in their dynasty leagues. Are you up for this task with me? We're going to figure it out today.
Alan, I'm glad I was on this show because this show is easy. A lot of these rookies bust, right? We could say, I could rattle off 10 guys, and we're gonna look back in 3 years, and 6 or 7 of them probably will be bust. That's just the nature of what we do here. Which this could be a topic for a whole nother show. But I'm definitely a trade away rookie picks for proven veterans guy.
I mean, you are preaching to the converted, my friend. I would never make a rookie pick if I didn't have to. And sometimes you're going to lose value on that, right? Like
Sure.
I traded away. I thought I was going to be a team that was in the final 4. I traded away a rookie pick. I forget who it was for, a good player. It might've been for like a Mike Evans or a Tyreek Hill type that was like just crushing it. And then things didn't break my way. And this is the downside. It ended up being pick 5. So that's like, Drake May and Superflex. So it doesn't work out sometimes, but hey, look, it's fun to draft Drake May right now, but there's no guarantees that he won't bust.
Exactly. I mean, I would say if I had that 105, I'd probably be looking to ship it now. And maybe you do make more than you did when you picked up, Tyreek or Evans or whatever. But again, we look back in even 2 years, we might be saying, that was a good trade. And Tyreek Hill, right, for a couple seasons was better than Drake May.
Right. It just seems like in a line of soldiers, there's always one clown that sticks out. And what I mean by that is like last year, where were you on Quentin Johnston? Because he was the one everyone was like, not so sure. But some people were in, some people were out. So where were you on him last year?
Yeah, I probably ended up being more in than I should have. I kind of pre-draft, I had him labeled as a wide range of outcomes guy. This guy could boom, he could bust. When he lands how he did with the draft capital, going to the Chargers with Justin Herbert, I was kind of in at that point. So that was the case, right? That the landing point or the landing spot kind of fooled me. And I ended up, probably definitely with more Quentin Johnston than I wish I ended up with.
Right. But he was definitely the guy where you were like, wait a second, he just doesn't look like the others with everything. And I guess really what I'm saying is like, okay, so you were a little bit more in. I guess this is more not a Quentin Johnston question, but when we're trying to identify a bust, what is one of the red flags that you identify, whether it's just like narrative, gut, statistics? What's a red flag for you over Draftsharks?
I mean, I think Quentin Johnston's a perfect example because I think he got inflated because of the landing spot. And I think that, that's a big mistake dynasty owners make. Like, if a guy's not good at football, it doesn't matter how good the landing spot is, right? Like he's not going to produce for us. And I think, that's kind of what we found out with Quentin Johnston.
I mean, the landing spots to me, I know that not everyone loves the 2024 landing spots, but let's just look at the first round Superflex ADP, all of the good players. And again, are there any landing spots that, I don't see any this year. Like I like them all. I'm trying, if there's one that I'm not thinking of, we can discuss here, but is there a guy that landing spot you're like, not so sure about that one?
No, honestly, and I said this right after the first round wrapped up on that Thursday night. I said, I think most of your first round dynasty rookie picks probably gained value in the first round of the draft because we had all the quarterbacks go most higher than we expected. I am with you that the wide receivers all landed in good spots. That doesn't mean I like them because again, I'm trying to learn from my QJ mistake and fade guys that don't look like good prospects and landing in good spots. I think those are guys you want to be wary of. But I'm with you. I think the landing spots generally, especially in the first round, were positive.
I'm surprised that I heard blowback on like the Brock Bowers going to the Raiders spot because I was like, what were people expecting? Like, what would happen if he would have gone to the Jets, Jared? Like, that's a better landing spot. I mean, I don't remember Aaron Rodgers loving rookies or tight ends. I mean, who was the last Packers tight end? I mean, people sometimes point to Jermichael Finley. I remember him being a disappointment. So let's start with Brock Bowers. And not that we're calling him a bust. And hang with us here because we absolutely will identify some of our busts. But with Bowers on the Raiders, is this a disappointment? I mean, what are your expectations? Because he's already, he's top 2, top 3 in Dynasty. And, tight end 8, 10-ish in redraft ranks. So there is a gap there. So that must mean when you see 24 redraft ranks lower than dynasty ranks that people might be expecting a little bit of a disappointing 24, Jared.
Yeah. And the Bauer spot was disappointing. Like it could have been better, but I'm not sure how much better it could have been. Like you said, like Bowers was a guy, if you were, doing mock drafts or reading mock drafts, it was always kind of tough to place him, right? It was like the Jets, The Broncos, I mean, would Denver have been a whole lot better? I don't think so. You know, the
Bengals, maybe that would have been the spot,
So,
but there's two
yeah,
alpha receivers there.
there was no glaring, like, this is the spot we want Brock Bowers to land in. Now, again, I do think, I think, you know, Denver, Indy, you know, those places would have been better. Because in Vegas, you have a bunch of questions, right? You have quarterback, who's the quarterback of the future. It's not on the roster right now. You have a target hog there in Devontae Adams, who, you know, he's going to be there for another year or two at least. To me, like, Michael Mayer's like the least of Bowers' concerns. Like, if he's as good as we think he is, like, Mayer's not going to stop Bowers from, you know, being an every down tight end and dominating the tight end targets there. So, you know, Bowers, to me, like, post draft, he slipped a little. Maybe he's like slipped within his tier, but he didn't like fall a tier. He wasn't a big faller. It's another case where you just got to, you know, bet on the talent with this guy.
Right. I mean, let's just stick with Bowers for a second here. Who's going to have more fantasy points in 2024, Bowers or Jacoby Myers in PPR leagues?
I'd go Bowers.
Okay, but it's not like a slam dunk. It's like, okay,
no, it's close. It's close.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Very interesting. Yeah. No, it's something to think about there. What are some examples of some like highly touted rookies? We already talked about Quentin Johnston in the past that maybe ended up busting or disappointing, I think is a better word, right? And then what were some of those warning signs? And the reason is, you know, I titled this podcast, We Found the Bust. So it's not necessarily about specific players, where I want to know what the red flags are throughout the whole process, starting with college, you know, combine, all that stuff. What are the red flags that you're looking for of these specific guys?
Yeah, I think it's the breakout age is huge for me, right? Like, you want to see guys that dominate early on in college, because you look at someone like, you know, Xavier Legette. Yeah, he has the huge 5th college season, but he does it as my big thing is his age compared to who he's doing it against, right? Like, he's a 23-year-old dominating these like 19-year-olds, like that matters. He should be dominating those guys, and if he's not, that's a big concern. So that's a big thing for me. And you know, draft capital is important to me too when we look back on this, because, you know, we know that's what creates immediate opportunity for these guys. You know, they might not keep the opportunity if they're not good, but if NFL teams invest a high pick in these guys, they're going to get immediate opportunity. That's going to, you know, lead to at least potential for early season or, you know, early career fantasy production.
Can you believe that my internet went out, Jared, in the middle of my own podcast? Yeah.
Perfect.
So
right?
this is what we're going to do because there's a massive storm here. Just we're going to end the pod here, and then we'll figure out another time or another day that works because it's. Oh wait, I think it's back on here. I'm going to enter the studio. Hang on.
Okay.
Hold on.
We're doing it live.
Yeah, this is all.
There we go. Dude, if it wasn't technical difficulty, it wouldn't be fun. There's a massive storm here in Florida. What were you talking about? Were you cursing me, telling people what an a-hole I am? What was going on?
Nothing was going on. Bunch of silence.
Yeah. Oh, really? You didn't talk? All right. There is nothing, no one more I trust than you to be in here alone and talk here. There's a tropical storm going on outside, and all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, here it goes. But we're back. I sound okay?
Sound good to me.
All right, man. Let's that would be embarrassing if we hadn't podcasted a bunch of times before. All right, we're talking about rookie busts. Jared, let's just get right to it. Who's somebody that you're worried about in that top 12, top 15 ADP Superflex drafts? Again, when we say bust, that it's a risky pick, wide range of outcomes. Use that term. I like that one. Give me your first guy.
Yeah, it's funny. We opened talking about Quentin Johnston because I'm going back to the new rookie wide receiver with the Chargers in Ladd McConkey, who I can't get on board with as a round one pick in Superflex. I mean,
I love it.
Yeah, this guy never topped 762 yards in college. Like, I mean, we can make excuses for him. Georgia's run heavy offense. He's sharing the field with Brock Bowers, but like sometimes this doesn't have to be that complicated. Like the guy never topped 762 yards across 4 years at Georgia. The market shares weren't good. Never topped a 17% share of receiving yards or a 23% share of receiving touchdowns. Here's a crazy thing for me with Ladd McConkey. He played 9 games last year, and not a single one of those 9 games did he finish top 2 among Georgia wide receivers in pass routes. He was a part-time player for his college as a 4th year senior last year. He was a part-time player, and I don't know, like coaches do stupid stuff all the time. Maybe we look back at this and we'll be like, why was Georgia making Ladd McConkey a part-time player? But that just worries me that this guy, he was a part-time player, 186 pounds. So, I don't think he's going to be like a big touchdown producer at the next level. He's probably going to need a ton of volume, which, maybe he gets that with the lack of wide receiver competition in LA right now, but it's also going to be, we don't want to believe this, but it's going to be a run centric offense.
I think people are coming around though. People are coming around a little bit on that now, but yeah, you're right though. Good. It's like, it's still hard to it's Justin Herbert. Oh, okay. They still think like there's going to be 600 pass attempts. Like what's the under over on pass attempts there? Is it, if I said 540, you take an under or over?
Let me tell you what I got Herbert for right now.
Okay.
559 attempts is what I have.
Okay. So we're in, we're not out of line there. You're taking over, but not with much conviction.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if they finish, better than, top half of the league in pass attempts. So, that's the landing spot's probably not as good as you think it is just because it's Herbert. Right. And the last thing I don't hear talked about with McConkey a lot is durability. I think there's some concerns there, right? He had back and ankle injuries last year. He had toe and knee injuries in 2022. And I'm usually not like this guy's injury prone. Let's fade him. I'll generally take quote unquote injury prone discounts, but you're not getting that. There's no discount with McConkey and you got to take him in round 1. So I'm just out on him at his current price.
Take a guess, Jared, and if you know it, just say it. What do you think the DraftKings yardage under over is for McConkey? I happen to know because we looked it up yesterday.
I mean, these always come in lower than you think. I'll say 750.
You nailed it, bastard. 775. Yep. Okay. Seven might be 755, actually. You got it. Yeah. So, if you're taking him at pick 110, 111, right, that's where you're going to get into bust trouble because you're passing on potentially some of these super flex quarterbacks. You're passing on, the touchdown leader in college, Brian Thomas, right? And we'll get into what their risk profiles are. But I like that you said that. And also, like, what's the upside of McConkey if it hits, right? Like, I kind of made the reference, like, he's a double, right? Which is great. You need that in fantasy. But some of those other guys have like grand slam, home run, the Keon Coleman stuff. We can talk about him, but I like that you identified him as a potential bust. Now, yeah, and everything, but the landing spot, it's all too eerie that it's also Quentin Johnston's landing spot from last year.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we shouldn't be giving the Chargers organization any benefit of that when it comes to picking these wide receivers.
Right. And for example, like Ricky, if you've been in a bunch of these rookie drafts, you see Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver who was drafted by the 49ers in the first round of real NFL draft. He falls to kind of like the mid-late first round. I mean, where would he go if Debo retired or was traded tomorrow? I mean, he would skyrocket above McConkey, right?
I was going to say, he'd go ahead of McConkey. He'd go ahead of Keon Coleman. I'm not sure. Maybe he'd go ahead of Brian Thomas. I think he'd get into the Thomas Xavier worthy tier, right? Like in the 1.9, 110 range, which would probably be correct. And that's the tricky part with Ladd McConkey. Like, I can't even tell you, assuming like Brian Thomas and Jonathan Brooks and Xavier Worthy are off the board, I'm not like screaming for anyone to go ahead of Ladd McConkey. To me, I'm just kind of out on that tier in general in this rookie class. And I know we opened, talking about trading away these rookie picks. That's definitely where I'm at. If I have, one of these picks in the, 110 to, 203, 204 range, I'm definitely trying to either trade down or ideally trade those picks for a, proven veteran.
The problem with trading down, and you're right. But the problem with trading down is that the average dynasty player, thanks to sites like Draftsharks, RotoWire, all the great content out there, they're so damn sharp nowadays. When I say they, I include, like the average guy, even just your casual dynasty player knows like, look, hey, 111 and 2-3, it's the same pick, right? I mean, there's an elite tier 1 through 8 in Superflex, a little tighter in some of the other in single quarterback. So trading back is tough unless someone has their guy, but I don't know. In some of the, maybe I'm in my own bubble, Jared, but no one really has their guy anymore. It's just like I have my few guys I like. It's just so leads me to the next question. What do you think the edge is in dynasty fantasy football from rookie drafts nowadays? If you can't quote trade down within a tier anymore,
I hate to repeat myself, but I'm going to go back for trading for these veterans.
That's it.
Just as an example, I had the 201 in a super flex rookie draft. I traded it straight up for Isaiah Pacheco, and I'm feeling good about that. I think Pacheco is a potential RB1 this season. Who knows beyond that? He doesn't have the draft capital. He's had some injury issues, all that, blah blah blah. But I think for this season, he's a guy that's going to be a difference maker. So that's an example of a trade I would willingly make, assuming you're a team that is not in full rebuild mode.
Dude, a lot of stormy weather comments in the chat here, and also even a text from someone that's in the chat. My man Frank sending me a link for an Amazon surge protector. Right? I mean, people care, Jared. They care. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So let me ask this. You're talking about trade. I just traded 2-1 the other day on the clock too. And this is a Michael Penix thing right here that I'm about to get into. I traded 2-1 and I won the league last year, and I'm projecting myself to be a pick 9, 10, 11, 12, a Final Four team. Now, obviously anything can go wrong. So I traded 2-1 for my 25 first last year to draft Michael Penix, knowing full well that if he doesn't play a snap this year, that his value, I can at least get my money back at some point during the year. So Michael Penix, I mean, all right, the Falcons drafted him. Where should we be thinking about him for fantasy football? Bust pick or some real high level, maybe upside in the future in Dynasty?
I mean, he was a tricky evaluation for me pre-draft. The thing I'll say though is the NFL was super high on this guy, right? Excuse me. There was a report, I think it was from Jeremy Fowler, that there were 3 teams that were trying to trade up into the top 10 to get Michael Penix. That if he didn't end up going to Atlanta at 8, so the NFL likes this guy. He can throw it deep. He landed in a nice spot weapons wise. I mean, we have questions about whether he's going to get in the field. The big question for me with Penix from a fantasy standpoint is what we're going to get rushing. Because I think that's so huge, right? If he's not going to run like he didn't run in college, obviously, then the ceiling's like Kirk Cousins, which is fine. We'll take a Kirk Cousins in Superflex, that's super valuable. But then you look at what Penix did at his pro day, running what was a 4.46. The guy,
it was fast.
Evidently has some rushing upside, and I think part of why he didn't run in college and maybe why he won't run in the NFL is because of the injury stuff. Like that, his coaching staff's going to want to keep him as healthy as possible. That's the big question for me, because if we can add even 400 rushing yards per season to, efficient passing, then you're talking about a guy who, could be a mid-tier quarterback one, maybe even, like a top 6, top 5 type of guy.
Yep. All right. So let's, I promised our guy JD here, who gave us a generous little tip here, super chat. And we have the great Jared Smola here from Draftsharks. So Jared, I'm going to read the question out loud and you're going to get the first crack at it. Which 3 should be on my 3-player taxi squad from Smith, Cowing, Garendo, Burton, and/or Drake May, who isn't needed to start yet for my super flex this season? It's actually a pretty good question because there's a mix of guys that you want to store versus put on your active roster. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so Smith and Cowing would be my first 2 guys to put on the practice squad. I think, we're talking about Pearsall struggling to find snaps. Cowing, it's going to be nearly impossible without multiple injuries ahead of him on the depth chart. Smith, Anaya Smith could theoretically win the slot role in Philly, but even then, I'm not sure how much that's worth. With 3 target hogs ahead of them and Saquon Barkley now. So those 2 would be for sure. In Superflex, I would struggle putting May on the taxi squad. Like, you never know what's going to happen. Quarterbacks get hurt. I think you want to have Drake May available. I would probably
Garendo.
I'd probably go Garendo. Yeah. Jermaine Burton has a good shot to win the number 3 job, and he is 1 injury away to Chase or Higgins. Right. And potentially, being someone we can think about starting, I think.
If Burton shows his first round draft capital upside, I know he was drafted in the 3rd round, they might trade T. Higgins in season while he still has it under a tag. So I think we're in agreement there. Great question, because and I agree with the logic there. Thanks, JD. Back to Penix for a second here. There's a couple. The upside options are what I think that one. Like, if I set his number of starts in 2024, Michael Penix, at a half, and I'm forcing you to bet $500 of your own money, which side are you taking? Under or over a half a game started in 24, Jared?
Oh, I take the over.
Easily.
I think easily. There are multiple paths to him getting there, right? One is Cousins just isn't ready for the start of the season. He's, in his mid to late 30s, coming off a super serious injury. Like, he might just not be ready. He might suffer a setback. And then there's, he just struggles. The team struggles. Atlanta could be okay, but they might be out of it by, December. And then you see Penix. So I would, if you set the line at 1.5, I'd probably still take the over.
Yep. And right. And then there's also, the Atlanta's 2-4, 3-3. Kirk Cousins rolls an ankle in week 6. And you know what? They're like, all right, Kirk Cousins is still our guy, but we just want him to get 100%. We're going to sit him the week before the bye, whenever that is. Penix comes in and has the Will Levis game. It's over. There's no going back from the Will Levis game. Those big bombs, 3 touchdowns with those weapons. Yeah. There's another, you talk about range of outcomes. There's one where he just out of the box is elite.
They spent the 8th overall pick on this guy. It's such an awkward situation. What if Cousins is not ready for week 1 and Penix comes out and throws for 260 and 2 touchdowns in week 1? Are you really going to put this, 8th overall pick rookie back on the bench after a good debut? It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. But there are tons of paths for Penix, I think, to even, get on the field this season.
And this is why we started this conversation talking about pick 2.1. That's why I gave my 25 first, which I project to be late, to get Penix. I didn't really even need a quarterback because I have a lot of outs here, Jared. I could either, like I said, if he doesn't play a snap, my pick gains value because he's going to be perceived as 1 year closer to starting. And if they're in, people give up in Dynasty in week 4, week 5. If there's a team that has Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, just any superstar, I could dangle Michael Penix in front. They're going to want him. And I would just use Tyreek Hill since he's a quote elite producer. I could just hand him Michael Penix for Tyreek Hill, but I probably wouldn't be able to hand him a 25 first for Tyreek Hill. He'd want at least a 2nd or a 3rd extra. So it's worth more than that.
Yeah. And that's a great general concept. But you asked before, where are edges in rookie drafts? And I think that's one. And this example made me think of it, is just thinking of these guys more as assets rather than, players that are going into your starting lineup. Like Michael Penix is an asset that, like you said, is not going to lose value over the next 12 months. He might appreciate in value. So, think of it that way rather than, someone who, might not be in your starting lineup all year, but it's still going to help your dynasty squad, grow in value.
How do you balance the potential upside of a rookie with the risk of busting? So let's go back to Ladd for a minute here. what is the upside for him? And then how are you balancing those two?
Right. I don't want to say I don't care about downside at all with rookies, but I barely care at all about downside, right? Like, again, most of these guys are going to bust. That's why Keon Coleman to me is pretty easily the pick over Ladd McConkey, because I see a path to Keon Coleman, like, being a top 16 fantasy football wide receiver. Think it's about his profile, the big playability, the touchdown upside because of his size and skill set. So that's where I think Coleman might be even riskier than McConkey. He might be even more bust potential, but at least I see a path to him mattering where it's tougher for me to see that path with McConkey.
Right after the draft picks, I was on a couple draft streams and people asked me McConkey or Keon Coleman. And my initial instinct was Keon Coleman as well. It was like, which one of these two players can have 15 touchdowns?
Yep.
The answer is Keon Coleman. All right. Just want to let everybody know this podcast, RotoWire Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by Circa Sports. Jared, have you ever been out to Circa in Las Vegas, the hotel?
Have not, unfortunately. I would love to.
You know about it though. It's like basically, yeah. I mean, we go every year for RotoWire. They're great sponsors of RotoWire and the podcast. And I mean, it's the best sports book. They have the most intricate props. I don't think they even have limiting on these props. You can really go in hard on something. Like some prop books will like limit you to $10, $20, $50. Like there's no limits. You want to bet because they're sharpened up a little bit. So Circa Las Vegas. Certainly go out there, check it out. If you're ever going out to Las Vegas, it's the best place to save for. And also, Prize Picks. If you've listened to fantasy football or any sports podcast, Prize Picks, guys, you've played it. You know the deal. So it's RotoPod is our code, ROTOPOD, 100% deposit match. Are you getting more into the pick'em games nowadays, Jared? Do you play throughout the season at all? And if so, on Prize Picks specifically, do you like to do the 2, the 3, the 4? How do you play Prize Picks usually?
Yeah, I go big. We're trying to make some big money, and I think correlating your over unders is a really strong.
Mores or lesses. They're not called under overs. They're mores or lesses.
Mores or lesses. Excuse me.
You're gonna get this podcast shut down, Jared.
Yeah,
it's not gambling. It's not. We promise. It's not.
Of course not.
Yeah. But when you say correlation, what do you mean? Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking a quarterback to go more. You're taking, one of his receivers to go more, and maybe that team's running back to go less. Right? You're just kind of thinking about how a game's going to play out, and making correlated bets that way.
There's a little DFS gamesmanship in there too.
Yep, for sure.
All right, RotoPod, ROTOPOD, Prize Picks. All right, back to actually, we're going to take a quick break here for the audio audience, but when we come back, Jared's going to identify his next bust. He's guaranteeing a bust, so he doesn't want you to draft him, right? He's 100%. He's putting his whole reputation on the line here. We'll be back in 5 seconds. All right, Jared Smola from Draftsharks. You follow him as I do at Smola. What is it? At Smola DS, right? For Draftsharks.
Correct. Yep.
All right. Give me another bust. Someone that you're a little bit worried about here.
Yeah, I'm out on Blake Corum. I think if you draft Blake Corum, you're drafting the Kyren Williams handcuff, which has actually as a handcuff, like he's I think one of the better ones in fantasy football because we've just seen how productive Sean McVay running backs are. Right. We obviously saw it with Kyren Williams, saw it with Todd Gurley. Even, between those two guys, we saw some, lesser running backs have big games under McVay. So great handcuff. I don't want to draft a handcuff in the middle of the second round of my Superflex Dynasty draft.
He's been moving up even before. I've seen him taking it 2-4 now. It's like, oh
yeah. I loved the quote from Sean McVay in the post-draft press conference. He was asked about, Blake Corum and why he took Blake Corum. And he said because he reminded him of Kyren Williams, and then went on to gush about Kyren Williams for the next 20 or 30 seconds, which he did all last year. Shout out to Coach Speak Index, the Twitter account who, watches all the press conferences. Multiple times last year, there were, clips of McVay just gushing about Kyren Williams. Again, he did it again when asked about Blake Corum. He's supposed to be talking about his new rookie running back, and he instead uses that time to talk about how much he loves Kyren Williams. So I think Kyren's role as the lead back is still pretty safe. I think he's not going to see as much volume as he did last year. Blake Corum is there to spell him, for, a handful of touches per game. But I just think, Kyren Williams was good last year in advanced metrics, even just beyond the fantasy production. Again, he was in a great situation, but he was good in terms of missed tackles, forced yards after contact per attempt, all that stuff. Blake Corum was not last year. Blake Corum, I feel confident saying Blake Corum had the least impressive 1,200 yard, 27 touchdown season in college football history last year. He ran behind an awesome offensive line. You look at Pro Football Focus run blocking grades. Michigan was 9th in the country last year. You look at Blake Corum's advanced metrics. So there were 157 running backs in college football last year that had 100 plus carries. Blake Corum was 151st among those 157 in yards after contact per attempt, 152nd among those 157 in missed tackles forced per attempt. So he was not doing much beyond what was blocked for him. You could
That's
say
what I was going to ask you. That's what I'm saying. Is the takeaway where whatever's blocked for him, he'll get it, but not much after that. Okay. All right.
Yeah. That's kind of what I see. And the question for me, because he was much more impressive in 2022 before the knee injury. So, I don't know. Maybe the knee was still an issue all last season. I find that tough to believe. But maybe we'll look back on this and say, he is closer to the guy he was in 2022, because the 2022 season was impressive. But again, last year Corum was kind of just was a product of the situation he was in to me.
So why do you think they used the third round? A third round pick is a valuable pick, especially for a running back. So what do we kind of logicked our way through why Atlanta made the pick for Penix. Why did the Rams use a third round pick on a running back? Is it just because they didn't like their depth at all and they wanted solid depth because they saw Kyren go down?
I think so. Yeah. So their depth heading into the draft was Ronnie Rivers and Zach Evans. And the Rams have now picked a running back in 7 straight drafts.
Whoa. That is wild. That is wild. Yep. Can we name them? Can you name them?
No, definitely not. And honestly, most of them were not picked in the third round. They were usually day 3 guys. So I'm not, saying Corum's just another guy. They invested more in him, but I do think it was more of an insurance thing. They did not want to have to hand the backfield over to Ronnie Rivers or Zach Evans. And I think there is something to be said where Corum from a skill set standpoint is kind of similar to Kyren Williams. I think he can approximate 80% of Kyren Williams if he comes in, but I don't see him as a real threat to take over Kyren Williams' job.
I'm going back to just 2019 to see who the Rams running back was they drafted here. Just to let's see, is there anyone here? Well, I guess
that seven straight.
Okay, I'm not seeing it here, but maybe. Yep. I mean, this is a fascinating stat. That's why, Right. Wait, Los Angeles Rams. I'm going back to 2018.
Looks like 2019 was the last time they didn't. Right?
The one I landed on. Okay, so 18.
No. Sorry. No, 2019 was Darrell Henderson.
There you go. There it is.
Round 3.
So you're right. And 2018 is John Kelly. Remember that guy? Oh my God. This is wild. That's cool. And you're right. Because last year when they got in trouble, Darrell Henderson off the street and Royce Freeman. He'd been dropped and forgot. I thought he was taken out of the database. It's been so long since he's been on the team, So that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think despite the 2 excellent wide receivers McVay has, the running game has always been such a huge part of his offense. He can't not have that guy that he can kind of count on to carry the load. So I do think the Corum pick as insurance was an important pick for that team.
In redraft terms, I always say that because someone's going to reach up to the 11th round to take Corum, he's the better value than Kyren Williams. And then what's going to happen is I go, he's going to be the best week 7 waiver wire pickup. He's like a blow your fab guy in week 7 or whenever Kyren misses his first week. So, and especially if you have a 5 bench. Now, if you have Kyren Williams and you're a little worried, I'm not going to hate on you for taking him a little ahead. But when you're drafting him ahead of Ricky Pearsall, when you're taking him ahead of, let's talk about Xavier Legette, because he seems like another guy that has bust potential there. All right, let's balance our first round wide receiver draft capital here. He's going in a fair spot at 2.8, 210-ish, but what are the red flags? You kind of identified it a little bit earlier on, but are you just completely out on him? Or you take a third round receiver like Roman Wilson over someone like Legette?
No, I wouldn't, and I don't like Xavier Legette, but I think where he's going in drafts, I've taken Legette once already in the mid second round. Didn't feel good. I, not surprisingly, was trying to trade out of that pick, but I didn't find a taker and kind of settled on Legette. The red flags are obvious. We already talked about it. The guy had 600 receiving yards total in his first 4 college season, and there were some injuries, and there was like a motorcycle accident, a bunch of like kind of funky stuff he went through, but still, like, to do absolutely nothing through 4 years. Now, the 2023 season was super impressive, both from a raw production standpoint and all the, advanced metrics we look at. He was really strong. But again, it came as a, 23-year-old, playing against guys that are, 3-4 years younger. So I think he has major bust potential. You like that he got first round capital. I don't love the landing spot. Like, there's obviously major questions with Bryce Young. Dave Canales had a nice season in Tampa last year. That was his first season, as an offensive coordinator calling plays. So, like, he's still a bit of a question mark. Like, there's a wide range of outcomes with the entire Panthers offense, which I think only makes, Legette a more volatile dynasty asset. Like, he could swing in either direction pretty easily.
Yeah, and we already said you've woken me up to, hey, wide range of outcomes is another word for it's, bust is looming. How do you differentiate between like a struggling rookie and someone who's going to be a bust? I mean, Treylon Burks comes to mind from a couple years back, the first few weeks of the season. There's endless. So are there certain metrics? Is it a feeling? Is it do you anchor to some of your pre-draft stuff? So when a rookie's struggling, how do we know when to get out early? Like right now, JSN would be another example. He struggled a little bit.
Yeah, like JSN, I'm not worried about it at all because there are valid excuses, right? I mean, he's playing behind two really strong NFL wide receivers. At least, JSN got on the field like we wanted him to. The target share was fine. It was kind of what I expected. I think that's my thing with JSN is I was below consensus for 2024 on him already. So he kind of did what I expected. So it wasn't a surprise to me that JSN, wasn't a great fantasy producer last year. But yeah, you have to look at these guys in the context of their NFL offense. Who are they competing with? How strong is the offense in general? Like, you at least want to see them get on the field if, they should, and, draw a decent amount of targets. If they can do that, I'm not super worried about them going forward.
If we're going to do a bust show, I can't help but at least bring up Bo Nix, and we could discuss if he's a bust or not. I mean, some of our guys thought that he was a quarterback that would be lucky to have been drafted in the second round, but we have to adjust, right? Sean Payton, I mean, that's something, right? Takes him at 12 overall. Is he have some serious bust risk right here, or are they going to be so wedded to him at this point that for fantasy football, forget real football, that he's almost too big to fail?
Yeah, he definitely has bust potential. I mean, talked about your guys thinking he's a round 2 pick. It sounds like Denver was the only team that had a round 1 grade on him. I think that was another note from Jeremy Fowler pretty recently. Like, no other team thought Nix was a first rounder. Now, to me, Sean Payton thinking this guy is a first rounder means something, right? Like, Payton's someone I would definitely trust as a quarterback evaluator. There were, film guys pre-draft that said Bo Nix was kind of an ideal fit in Sean Payton's offense, which makes sense to me, kind of a Drew Brees-esque distributor. That's kind of what Nix was in college. So I think that the landing spot is fine. There is still, to me, plenty of bust risk, but kind of like we said with Penix, like, unless Nix has this disastrous rookie season, like, he's probably not going to lose much value in Superflex. So I think where he's going, he's available in the late first round of rookie draft. Sometimes even falls into the early second. Like, I think he's a fine pick in that range. Again, as an asset, even if we don't think he's going to be like a big time contributor to our Superflex teams.
Here's the only problem I have with Bo Nix for fantasy is that if he comes out and has like 2 poor games in a row, when I say poor, 175 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick. Like, his value is going to be gone almost. Like, he'll have to have multiple good games in a row to retain that value. And that's why my next question is, you're on the clock. You need a quarterback, not immediately, because the answer is Bo Nix there. But if you just want to draft a quarterback at pick 12, Nix or Penix?
Penix for me. But it's close. Like, it depends on your team situation. Yeah, it's close. Like you said, obviously, if you're someone that needs points this year, I don't think Nix is indefensible.
Right. But I'm saying, let's say you have Josh Allen and Tua. So you have 2 guys, but you don't have a third guy.
Penix for me.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense here. Anybody else in the first 2 rounds, top 24, that you want to highlight that has some serious bust risk in your opinion?
I mean, I didn't like Ricky Pearsall as a prospect. And, the landing spot, there are positives, there are negatives. The one thing to me, though, is like, let's not give Kyle Shanahan and this 49ers team, the benefit of the doubt when it comes to drafting wide receivers, because they've drafted plenty of busts. So like, I'm not going to say, Pearsall, we were wrong on him in our pre-draft evaluation just because the 49ers drafted him. So Pearsall is another guy I am generally staying away from in rookie drafts.
I mean, I know it's a quarterback, but Trey Lance, right? I mean, he's a epic bust. I mean, when we talk about the Mount Rushmore of busts, he's probably on that list, right?
Yeah, and I mean, Dante Pettis comes to mind to me too as a wide receiver.
Jawan Jennings didn't perform there. I mean, people liked him. I mean, he wasn't an elite prospect or anything like that. So, yeah, and then late round guys. Oh, you know what? Actually, let me change the question up here. So when we talk about like busts and identifying busts, do you think that the whole he's too small because of like Tank Dell, like, is that gone away? Should we throw that part of it out of our bust evaluation? I mean, we used to like only want the Calvin Johnson body types.
Right.
I mean, that was the case for Quentin Johnson. So should the size be thrown out, or is still something that you're going to weigh on when trying to identify a player that could disappoint?
It is a tricky one, and I think I still weigh it. I think it's fair to say the NFL has moved in the direction of smaller guys being able to produce, and we've seen it. It feels like more recently than we have in the past. I do think the NFL tends to be cyclical with this stuff, so like it might not keep trending in that direction. It might go back, 2 or 3 years. We're talking about big wide receivers again, so I think you got to be careful with that. The other thing, and obviously Xavier Worthy is the guy in this class where we're talking about size. I do think draft capital matters here, right? Like most of these small guys, even Tank Dell obviously was not a round one pick. The only other guy recently to be, in this size bucket to be a round one pick is Devonta Smith, who obviously has, been solid for dynasty teams. So I do think the fact that the Chiefs were willing to spend a first round pick on Worthy should make us less concerned about his weight.
Right. And it seemed like the evaluation on him as well, on Worthy, was that he's not just showing, I mean, just a speed guy run down the field. He can run some routes and make an impact on the game. Is he in a tier by himself in rookie drafts? Like after the big three receivers, if you include, Dunze, Marvin, Neighbors, is it Worthy the next guy, or is that not the case for you?
Worthy's the next guy, but I still have Brian Thomas in a tier with him among wide receivers. I have those two like clear ahead of the Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, that type of tier. And then I have Jonathan Brooks in that tier with the wide receivers. I actually have been leaning towards Jonathan Brooks over both Worthy and Thomas in rookie drafts.
So it's just funny that there seems to be a dividing, people taking sides on Benson versus Brooks. And I understand it. But what I found, Jared, is that those who are on Brooks as the RB1 are willing to take him in the first round, even of Superflex drafts. Whereas if you're a Benson advocate for RB1, you're willing to take him in the second round, 202, 204. So that it seems to me, my conclusion is that the Brooks RB1 drafters are a little bit more convicted.
As they should be, in my opinion. Now, Benson's the clear RB2 to me in the class, but he's the clear RB2. Like Brooks is the clear RB1 for me. I had him clear RB1 pre-draft. I know it's only 10 games of him as lead back in college, but they were super productive, super efficient. And I think, we're obviously not going to hold the fact that he didn't do much in his first 2 seasons against them, considering the backfield competition. And I like this landing spot. I obviously, said Canales is still a bit of a question mark as a play caller, but I love what he did with Rachaad White last year. Obviously, I think Jonathan Brooks is a better version of Rachaad White. Canales has already talked about, Brooks being versatile, being able to contribute on the ground and in the passing game. With Benson, I think by 2025, the backfield is his. James Conner, I don't think is going away this season. He was still very good last year. You look at pretty much any advanced metric you want to look at. James Conner was near the top of the league. So I think, he'll miss some time this year. Likely Benson will get some run, but I think it's going to be a season before Benson takes over as the starter in Arizona.
And it's like James Conner to me is like the running back version of Tyler Lockett. He's not going away. Exactly. He's not a player that like Arizona's be like, oh, he's 30, he's gone. Be like, no, let's bring him back. He does everything right. The coaches like him. Eventually maybe Benson is a 50-50, but let's say that the Benson drafters get their wish and Connor's just out the door. It's not like Trey Benson was a first or second round pick. They're going to draft another Trey Benson in the third or fourth round next year, and then he's going to be back in that situation. Whereas it looks like the RB1, Brooks basically has the Breece Hall draft capital, right? So more or
Yeah,
less,
exactly.
you know, so.
Yep, close. Yep.
All right, Jared, you did it again. I promised I would keep you only for 45 minutes or so, and you delivered. The people love you in the chat. Every time I have you on, people get very excited. I get a lot of Twitter DMs and stuff. You're very popular on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, so I do appreciate you coming in. Follow Jared as I do, at Smola DS, or is there underscore in there somewhere?
No underscore. Smola DS.
Screw underscores. And bring everyone, tell everyone, highlight something that you're doing that you want everyone to know about, or promote a piece of the content, and how to sign up for Draftsharks as I do.
Yeah, so our rookie guide is updated post-draft on Draftsharks. That's totally free. You go on the site, you just give us your email. We'll send that to you. Definitely check that out. Again, that's free. And the big thing is our Dynasty rankings and our Dynasty draft war room for all your Dynasty drafts. The draft war room is sweet. It syncs up to your league. It's going to give you, customized rankings that are factoring in the league scoring system, your current roster. It's dynamic throughout the draft. It's going to update based on who's available in your team needs. So that's the big tool. I use that for all of my Dynasty rookie drafts.
Yeah, and I want to impose on our friendship again and ask for renewal. You're so kind to me. You give me a renewal. You give me the premium. Yeah, so I'll have to hit you up for that, because I went on before and I was like, oh, wow, it lapsed. I have to get on there. And obviously, but
I got you.
It's one of those things. Yeah, listen, it's so good, the site, that I use it. I'll admit, I use it. I use it to help me write content. I love your takes on things. I love how the site looks. So I recommend everyone, get a RotoWire subscription as you do, rotowire.com/pod. But absolutely, you should have a Draftsharks premium membership. I usually subscribe to like 3 or 4 sites. I mean, that's what you should do. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. Sorry about the tech problem. It was Jared. He threw me off. But we made it through as always, and we'll see you next week with another Dynasty Fantasy Football.